This story is about a human who lets a deadly alien predator bite him on purpose. What follows isn't retreat, but a chilling lesson the entire swarm will never forget. As lines between prey and predator blur, something ancient awakens. The sky above Charost 7 rippled like a bruised wound, a violet and ash-gray smear above the jagged mountain range below. Nolan Briggs stood on a sheer outcropping of basalt, his left boot wedged into a crack, right hand bracing the rifle slung tight to his side. Wind howled up from the canyons, bringing the scent of ozone, iron, and something acrid he didn't recognize. Something alive. "Still nothing on thermal," came Cora's voice through the comm. Steady, focused. She was always like that before things got ugly. Nolan grunted. "They're here, close. You ever hear the ground breathe?" He knelt, pressing his gloved palm to the stone. The basalt was warm, too warm for the altitude. It vibrated in pulses, like something massive moving far below. Or something many-legged. "This planet's got a heartbeat? We're standing on its damn ribs." 2 weeks ago, 4 survey teams stopped transmitting. Not a blip. The last message had been a scrambled vid feed of something dark and fast ripping through a containment door like paper. Command called it a probable biohazard. Nolan called it what it was. A hunt gone sideways. Their mission: locate the swarm nest, tag it for orbital strike, and not die in the process. The not dying part was why Nolan Briggs was on this op. Officially, he was a scout consultant with 12 years in special recon. Unofficially, he was the man they dropped when everything else failed. He didn't brag. Bragging required sleep and a clean conscience. Below him, Cora scanned the valley floor with a compact LiDAR rig. She moved lightly, quietly, with her shock blade sheathed across her back and sidearm unholstered. That's when he saw it. A shimmer, barely a flicker against the windswept rocks below. Heat distortion, wrong shape, wrong temperature, too many limbs. Then another, and another. Cora back to the ridge, now. She didn't argue. She never did. But she didn't make it 10 feet before the ridge exploded in front of her. The thing came up from the earth itself. 8 limbs, long, bent wrong, covered in barbed chitin that shimmered with dark iridescence. Its head, if it had one, unfurled like a fan of slicing bone, centered with a maw ringed in serrated fangs. Nolan dropped off the ledge, hit the slope in a controlled slide, rifle coming up. But the creature was faster. It reared, opened its jaws wide, and lunged, not at him, but at Cora. She dodged left, rolled and slashed. The shock blade hit. Sparks. But it barely staggered the thing. Her scream came half a second later, when it caught her by the leg and dragged her down. Nolan didn't fire. Not yet. He could have. He had a clear shot. He had 3 grenades and armor-piercing rounds. But he didn't move. He watched as the creature clamped down on her thigh with jaws, lined with backward-facing barbs, and started to shake like a shark. Cora, brace. She grabbed a rock, screamed through her teeth, and stabbed the creature's eye. It hissed. She went limp. Blood soaked the ground. And Nolan fired. 1 round took the creature's side off. A second burst blew through its chest, revealing the black organs beneath. The thing shrieked, flailed, and collapsed into a convulsing heap beside her. The swarm froze. They were watching. 10 of them, maybe more, emerged from the rocks. Some clung to the vertical walls, others slithered like eels with legs. Every eye compound or knot locked on the human holding the rifle. And then Nolan did something none of them expected. He dropped his gun. He walked down the slope, calm, deliberate, blood soaking the side of his pants from a scrape he'd taken in the fall. He knelt beside Cora and lifted her gently, checking her pulse. "Alive. Good," he muttered. Her leg was shredded, tendons exposed, muscle ruined. She was in shock but breathing. He didn't patch her up. Not yet. He stood, You want to test us, he said, not yelling but loud enough. Then watch. He stepped forward. He didn't raise his arms, didn't challenge. He stood, hands loose, chin tilted up just enough to expose his neck. The nearest predator, six-limbed and spined like a panther-sized spider, dropped low, then lunged. It bit him. Nolan didn't scream, though the pain was white-hot and absolute. The thing's jaws locked onto his left arm just below the elbow. The bite went through muscle and scraped bone. Still, he didn't scream. He grabbed the thing's neck with his right hand and twisted. Hard. A snap. Then he pulled its head back, still latched to his arm, and slammed it down on a stone until the skull cracked like an egg. The body twitched. Blood pooled. He yanked the head off and threw it aside, teeth still embedded in his arm. He turned to the others, pale now, breathing shallow. Anyone else? Silence. Then, movement. Slow. Backward. The swarm retreated a few feet, not far, but enough. He dropped to one knee beside Cora and finally opened the med pack. Pull steady, he muttered. Still bleeding. Compound femur fracture. She stirred, whispered, "You let it bite you." Had to. Needed to show them. Show them what? She asked, barely conscious. He looked past her at the silent ridge full of eyes. What happens when you touch what kills back? The adrenaline was fading. Pain came in waves now. He wrapped his ruined arm and tightened the tourniquet with his teeth. One-handed med work wasn't pretty, but he'd done worse with less. He sealed Cora's leg as best he could. She needed surgery. So did he. But first they had to survive the next few hours. He set up a beacon, locked it to distress, encrypted for humans only. Sat beside her, watched the swarm watching him. None of them moved closer. He whispered, "You saw what happens to the first one. The rest of you better be fast learners." By nightfall, 2 more tried. One burned to ash. The other was gutted with the very fang it left behind in Nolan's arm. The predators were many, but they were smart, and they'd just seen what happened when you picked the wrong prey. Cora didn't wake until late the next morning. Her lips were dry, face pale, and she tried to sit up before the pain pulled her down with a broken gasp. "Don't," Nolan said, without looking up. He sat with his back against the canyon wall, left arm now wrapped in layers of blood-streaked gauze and bound to his chest with a makeshift sling. He looked worse in daylight. Sweat slicked his forehead. His skin had a gray tint, but his eyes were sharp, always scanning. "I can't feel my foot," she whispered. "You won't for a while. You've got nerve damage. Artery didn't tear completely or you'd be dead. I packed what I could. We've got a few hours before the evac drone gets here." She winced as she tried to move again. "Why didn't they finish us off?" "They did the math," he nodded toward the rock shelf above them, "and they didn't like the answer." The swarm hadn't vanished. They had simply shifted, repositioned. Nolan had tracked them by their reflections in the glassy black rock and by the occasional, near-silent scrape of claws. They weren't leaving. But they weren't attacking either. Yet, Cora blinked up at him, then past him to the sun rising low and thick through a cloud of volcanic dust. "You're not all right." "No." She reached toward him, hand trembling. "That thing bit deep. Through the ulna. Maybe clipped the radial artery. No full transection or I'd have bled out. No nerve control past the wrist, though. Fingers twitch, but that's about it." He said it like he was describing the weather. "Why didn't you just kill it before it got close?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, "Because if I killed it fast, they'd think we were lucky, that it was weak. But if I let it bite me, if I let it do what it does best and I still end it, they understand what it cost. Pain teaches better than words." Cora looked at him a long time. "That's insane." "Yeah," he said, and leaned his head back against the rock. "But it works." It was nearly midday when they heard the drone. A low, pulsing hum reverberated down the valley. Nolan stood carefully, scanning the ridgeline. No movement. But he didn't relax. Cora tried to sit up again. Signal flare? Already done. Then why aren't you lying down? Because they're not done watching. As if on cue, a high-pitched shriek pierced the silence. Not from the ridge, from below, from the earth. Cora's eyes widened. There's more? Nolan didn't respond. He was already reaching for the detonator he'd wired into the outcrop. A last resort, buried charges they'd rigged when first scouting the path up. He flicked the safety off with his thumb. The drone appeared over the crest, sleek and narrow, a medevac skimmer with dual winches. As it descended, the ground beneath them cracked, then split. A shape, larger than the others, burst from the rocks like a torpedo. Heavily armored, hunched on 6 legs, its head flared wide with bone plating. Its chest throbbed with heat. The Alpha. It had waited. Nolan stepped forward. It didn't lunge. It looked at him. They stood there, one bleeding, one monstrous, for several seconds that felt like hours. The drone hovered, unsure. Then the Alpha did something none of the others had. It circled him, slow, observing. Cora shouted, "Nolan, fall back!" He didn't. The Alpha stopped in front of him. Then it opened its mouth and screeched a sound that vibrated through every bone in his chest. It wasn't an attack. It was a challenge. Nolan raised his good arm. No weapons. Just his body. He stepped toward it. The Alpha lowered its head and charged. Cora screamed. Nolan moved at the last second, using the Alpha's momentum. He grabbed its crest and turned with it, dragging its head down, then slammed his heel into its side. He didn't have the strength to wrestle it, not with one arm, but he had the trick. He yanked the pin on the last sticky grenade strapped to his boot and slapped it onto the Alpha's underjaw. Then he ran. The blast lifted the creature off the ground. Nolan didn't get far. He collapsed beside Cora, rolled over, and lay there blinking at the sky. The Alpha was dead, vaporized from the throat up. The others watched. Then they turned and vanished into the canyon-like smoke. Cora was crying. She didn't even realize it. "You're going to die if you keep this up." He didn't answer. The drone lowered its rig, scooped them both with mechanical precision, and began ascent. Inside, medtechs worked fast. They stabilized Cora's leg, sedated her, then turned to Nolan. The medic's hands hesitated over his arm. "Jesus, this thing tore straight through. We'll need to amputate. The infection risk." "No," Nolan rasped. "Try to save it." "There's not much left to save." "Try anyway." The medic paused, then nodded grimly. As the drone climbed out of the valley, Nolan finally let himself black out. His last sight was the ridge where the swarm had watched him fight with only one arm and still win. He didn't know if they understood human logic, but they understood spectacle. They understood consequence. And for now, that was enough. The surgical lights buzzed above Nolan's face, blurry halos of white spinning like stars. His vision came and went in flashes. Sterile white walls, voices muffled through masks, the sting of antiseptic, cold metal tools tapping glass. He drifted out again. When he woke next, it was dark. Not pitch black, but the low ambient glow of a medbay night cycle. The room smelled of ozone and bleach. A hiss of oxygen whispered beside him. He tried to move his left arm. He couldn't. "Easy," came a voice. It was low, calm. A man in gray scrubs approached, tablet in hand. "Name's Dr. Randall. You're at the Forward Triage Center on Ulysses Outpost. We stabilized you after the evac. You've been under for 4 days." Nolan blinked hard. His mouth was dry. "My partner?" "Cora Hayes. Still recovering. Stable. She's got a long road ahead, but she's conscious. She asked about you." Nolan exhaled. Dr. Randall looked at the readings. "You lost a lot of blood. Severe tissue trauma in the left forearm. 2 fractures. We fought like hell to keep it. You'll regain partial movement, maybe 70% function with therapy, but the nerve damage is permanent. Nolan's jaw tensed. But it's still there? It's there, barely. You're lucky the fang didn't go a centimeter deeper or you'd be missing a limb. Nolan shifted. Pain flared. He didn't flinch, but his face paled. Infection? Clean. We got to it in time. Your body fought harder than I've seen in a while, not just physically. You pushed back through multiple cardiac dips. You shouldn't have lasted more than 30 minutes without pressure meds. And yet... Now quit, Nolan muttered. No, Randall said with something close to admiration. You don't. 2 weeks passed. The rehab ward overlooked the outpost's docking platform. Nolan spent hours watching shuttles come and go. His left arm remained bandaged, stiff in a powered exosplint that hummed softly when he flexed. He practiced moving his fingers daily, gritting through the pain. He was slower, weaker, but he kept showing up. Cora joined him on the 10th day, wheeled in by a nurse. Her leg was braced from hip to ankle, covered in layers of synthetic tissue, scaffold, and support frames. She looked tired, but alive. You look like hell, Nolan replied without turning from the window. You sound better. Silence lingered between them. Then she asked, why did you really let it bite you? He thought a moment. Because they needed to see a wound and what came after it. They needed to understand that the pain they cause is just the start of what they get back. Do you think it worked? He finally looked at her. You tell me. They didn't finish you off. They didn't charge the drone. They watched, then they left. She frowned. They're planning something. Animals don't act like that. They're not animals, he said. Command agreed. 1 week later, Nolan stood slowly in the tactical briefing dome, arms still locked in its brace, his gait favoring his right side. He'd argued against being benched, lost that fight, but he was cleared to consult. The lead on the swarm's behavior was Commander Vasquez, a stoic officer who had survived 3 planetary engagements but looked like she still mistrusted the quiet ones. She brought up a map of Chero 7's southern hemisphere. They've regrouped. Nest movement patterns show new tunnels under the canyons. They're not retreating. They're reinforcing. We think they're adapting to human tactics. What kind of adaptation? Nolan asked. It's formations, staggered attacks, avoiding open terrain, coordinated positioning. Not learned behavior, he said, inherent. Vasquez nodded. Exactly. They're not just predators, he murmured. They're strategists. Vasquez paused. That's why we want you back on the field. Nolan raised an eyebrow. You just benched me. We're sending in a behavioral recon unit, unmanned. But we need the human element, something the swarm recognizes. You're not just the guy who survived. You're the one who bled and didn't back down. They know you. You're a variable we can't simulate. Nolan rubbed his shoulder, muscles twitching. They'll recognize me. That's the point. Preparations took 3 days. The recon pod was camouflaged, armored, and packed with sensors. Nolan was lowered into the southern ravine with a single directive: observe, not engage. He didn't bring a rifle this time, just a sidearm, medkit, and a recording suite. His arm brace had been replaced by a thinner support system with adaptive tensioners. It ached. He didn't complain. The air was thicker here, warm, still. No wind. He sat on a rock, drank from his water unit, and waited. An hour passed, and 2, then he heard the skittering. Fast, precise. He turned slowly. One of them had appeared on a ledge above him. Not the alpha species, a scout class, smaller, sleek. Its limbs moved like liquid steel. It didn't attack. It just watched. Another joined it. Then 3 more. All spread out, encircling his position at a careful distance. Nolan kept his breathing slow. You here to finish what your cousin started? He asked softly. The scout moved closer. Then it stopped, and did something impossible. It lowered itself, chest against the rock, head down. A submission gesture. The others followed. Nolan stared, frozen. He reached slowly for the comm mic. "Command, this is Briggs. You're not going to believe this." Because the predators weren't predators anymore. They were waiting for something, and the one they recognized had returned. They didn't move for 7 minutes. Nolan counted every one. The scouts remained in a half circle around him, each still in that strange, low posture, chests pressed to the rock, heads lowered like monks before a temple. One twitched slightly, not toward him, but toward the slope behind it, as if waiting for a signal. Nolan's voice was barely above a whisper. "Command, are you getting this?" "Loud and clear," came Vasquez's voice through the comm. "Our drone optics confirm. No hostile posture. No vocalization. No pheromone emission. We're standing by for your assessment." He didn't answer right away, because his instincts were screaming. Not danger, not fear, recognition. They weren't submitting to him. They were acknowledging him. "You're not here to kill me," he said aloud. The largest scout stepped forward. It approached slowly, stopping 5 feet away. Nolan didn't flinch. Then it did something even stranger. It turned, exposing its side just like the one that had bitten him. And it revealed something attached to its thorax. Embedded metal, a fragment of his shrapnel grenade, fused into its plating. The same creature? Nolan took a breath. "You lived." It flicked its head. "A yes?" Then it made a low, clicking grunt from its thorax. Immediately, the others shifted, not in aggression, in synchronization, a pattern. They were showing him something. The leader stepped away, then paused, waiting. Nolan understood. "Command, I'm going in. I'll keep the channel open." "Negative," Vasquez replied instantly. "You're to observe only. They're offering something. If I don't follow, we lose this." Silence. "Then, proceed at your discretion. We'll monitor telemetry." He followed. The scouts moved ahead, guiding him down a narrow slope into a fissure so well hidden that he wouldn't have spotted it with satellite imaging. They wound through a descending series of rock chambers, temperature increasing slightly as they went. Not enough to cook him, but enough to sweat through his backplate. They reached a cavern, massive, half lit by bioluminescent moss. He saw movement. Hundreds. The entire swarm. Adults, juveniles, hatchlings. They didn't attack. They cleared a path. At the far end of the chamber stood a different creature. Taller than the rest, more upright. Covered in ornate chitin, with streaks of orange and blue colors he hadn't seen in any combat encounter. Nolan stopped 10 feet away. The elder or leader stepped forward. Its eyes were deep and black, but not empty. It extended one limb and slowly touched the air near Nolan's injured arm. He tensed, but it didn't strike. It traced the air around the braced limb, then pulled back. That same low, vibrating grunt passed through its chest. Every other predator in the chamber responded. A wave of resonance, rising and falling, like an organic chorus. Nolan was breathing hard now. It hit him then, this wasn't a threat assessment. It was a treaty. The leader turned and walked to the far wall, where a mural was carved deep into the stone. Not natural erosion. Symbols, shapes, scenes. Nolan stepped closer. He saw a depiction, one that looked eerily similar to the Alpha's explosion in the valley. A creature in flames. Then others backing away. Next panel, the survivors watching a lone figure. The final panel, the swarm kneeling, heads bowed before that figure. He spoke into his mic. "They're not learning us. They're responding to something ancient. Something they've encountered before." "You're saying this has happened on other worlds?" Vasquez asked. "I don't know. But they see pain not as weakness, but proof. Endurance is a marker of leadership, maybe dominance, maybe alliance. That's why they didn't kill us when we were down. That's why they stopped when I bled and stood anyway." He turned back to the leader. "If this is what I think it is, they're offering to follow. The swarm vibrated again, low and unified, a frequency that resonated in his chest cavity. Not worship, not fear, solidarity. The leader stepped forward once more, extended a limb, and tapped Nolan's armored chest plate twice, then turned away. The gesture was clear. We've seen what you do, we've decided. Nolan exhaled and turned on the external broadcast of his helmet. All units, this is Briggs. We're standing on the edge of something big. Bigger than survival, bigger than war. They're not monsters. They're an ecosystem, and we've just been accepted into it. He paused, because I let the first one bite. He returned 2 hours later, escorted back up the canyon with the same careful procession. The scouts left him at the drop zone. No ambush, no games. Just distance. As the pickup shuttle descended, Vasquez's voice returned. Status? They won't attack again, Nolan said, unless we give them a reason to. 3 months later, Nolan stood before a full council at Lunar Command. His arm had regained partial use, scarred, limited, but functional. He briefed them for 3 hours. They asked about the bite, about the gesture, about the mural. He answered everything, then sat down. When the council asked the final question, what now? Nolan gave the simplest answer he could. We stop calling them predators, and we start listening. Later that evening, in a quiet med bay overlooking Earth's curve, Cora wheeled up beside him. She looked healthier now, walking with assistance. They sat in silence. You really think they've allied with us? She asked. I don't know if it's alliance, but they remember pain, they remember survival, and they respect those who don't back down. She looked at his arm. You still have nightmares? Only when I forget why I let it bite me in the first place. Cora gave a tired smile. To make a point? To give them a choice, he said. And for once, in a galaxy that had never given humans much of one, it was enough.